What's up everybody, and welcome here to a special video on my YouTube channel as I am going to be doing my predictions of the Premier League for this weekend. We'll start things first between Newcastle United and Chelsea at 12:30 on Saturday. Big matchup between Newcastle and as for Chelsea. Newcastle and Chelsea are now both through into the Carabao Cup semi-finals for the next round. Obviously, it looks like that Newcastle playing the other team who went through. I think it was Man City. I'm not even sure who's actually gone through to that semi-final with Newcastle, but I'm aware that Newcastle through. They're playing in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. Chelsea, however, they beat Cardiff during the week and they'll be playing against Arsenal or Palace. Depends who wins on the 23rd of December. I'm going to be live on my TikTok and Twitch doing a watch-along for Arsenal and Palace for the League Cup game, quarter-final. But these two teams will play each other in the league, though, Chelsea and Newcastle. And Newcastle are at home, Chelsea are away. In the last few games in the Premier League, in terms of the results, Newcastle lost 1-0 to Sunderland by an own goal by Waldemade from last week. As for Chelsea, in fact, they won 2-0 against Everton from last game. So these two teams, a loss for Newcastle last game and also a win for Chelsea last game. As Newcastle lost against Sunderland, of course, they have to try and get bounced back, obviously, because they are down in the bottom half of the table. Newcastle have got a lot of money. Newcastle can go all the way and win the Premier League, they could do, with the money they've got as a team. The only problem that Newcastle can't win the league is because of the financial fair play rules, and you can't buy what you can't get, in a way. And that's why Newcastle can't spend the players' money or buying the likes of bloody Mbappe or Messi or whatever to Newcastle due to financial fair play. That's why Newcastle are not as invested into a world-class player. Maybe Tonali is probably the one I would probably say is a top player for Newcastle in terms of world-class. Did very well at AC Milan. But about this game, in prediction-wise, I do think that Newcastle, I think they have to win it. Like I said before about Newcastle, they've got rich owners, not doing great this season at the moment. Probably the worst since the Saudi took over Newcastle. Probably the worst season for them. Not going to be anywhere near the relegation zone, of course not. But they're not in the top half of the table, though. So I'm going to go for a win for Newcastle. And I'm going to go for a 2-1 win over Chelsea. So I'm going to go for Newcastle to get the win. And I think Anthony Gordon will be on the score sheet on the weekend. And I do think he will be on the score sheet. And maybe Waldemade. I hope he does score. He's in my fantasy team. And I do back him to try and not score any own goals now, like last week against Sunderland. This week, he's got to put the ball into the back of the net. So I'm going to go for Waldemade and Anthony Gordon to score for Newcastle to win them the game, as I'm going for 2-1 as my prediction. Now we move on now to Bournemouth, and Bournemouth do play at home against Burnley. Burnley's in the relegation zone. Burnley cannot find a win. We all know how crap they've been. But Scott Parker does return back to the club. They actually got Bournemouth promoted in the first place into the Premier League in 2022. And that's away from home for Burnley. Bournemouth, good side. Very, very good side. We know how good they really are in terms of in the start of the season. I know they've drifted off a little bit, slightly down the bottom half of the table because teams around them have got results. Now, Bournemouth dropped down to like 14th. But a big draw against Manchester United on Monday Night Football. A big 4-4 game it was between United and also as well Bournemouth in that matchup. But as Bournemouth, the team, have been having some losing form and they got themselves a point over Man United on the week during the Monday's game, I do think Bournemouth, on paper, should beat Burnley. Burnley are not great. Burnley are crap. We know how poor they've been this season. I'm going 2-0 Bournemouth. Bournemouth, I'm backing you to win. I do think you'll win easily and comfortable. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 win for AFC Bournemouth. Now we move on now to my prediction between Brighton, Hove Albion and also Sunderland. Big matchup, by the way, between Sunderland and also Brighton. We know, obviously, for Brighton, they are in that fight, of course, in that top half of the table, really challenging in that top four race. Sunderland, however, the exact same boat as Brighton, challenging also in those European places. And Brighton and Sunderland never played each other in the top flight before in Premier League history, but both will meet each other, of course, on Saturday at the Amex Stadium. And I do like these two teams, actually, how they've played this season. I know that Brighton's not really been the big noise in terms of form in the top of the table or the top half of the table, but Sunderland, of course, are a massive talking point. Been brilliant last week against Newcastle. Had a little bit of losses there and in slightly as well, a little bit. Had their moments of defeats. But, however, Sunderland know how to get results. And I do think Sunderland will really give a game against Brighton on, obviously, Saturday afternoon. My prediction, this matchup between Brighton and Sunderland on Saturday, I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Sunderland. I do back Sunderland to get the win. And like they did against Newcastle, against them Stadium of Light Stadium. Obviously, Brighton, of course, are in good form. But they do end up losing at home a few times also this season. And I do think Sunderland might pick up something over Brighton. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 win for Sunderland as my prediction on Saturday. Now we move on now to the next game, of course. It's Man City and West Ham United. Man City had their sort of poor patches during the season. Obviously, Man City are now 2 points behind from us. We're currently top of the league, only 2 points clear from Man City though, and they're really lurking behind us slightly. And it's a bit worrying a little bit for us if we don't end up losing or dropping points to Everton on Saturday. We'll get to that prediction a little bit later. But this game here between City and West Ham United, they picked up some form as well. Draw, not really push themselves up above Leeds. Leeds are currently 17th and West Ham are currently 18th. And maybe a point wasn't enough for West Ham in their last matchup in the Premier League when they lost 3-2 to Villa, but they actually picked up a draw the week before that. So, in a way, as they're away from home to the Etihad Stadium, I do think a comfortable win will be a comfortable win, of course, for Man City. I'm going 4-0 win for City as my official prediction. I think Haaland will score a hat-trick, and I think Phil Foden will score for City. So I'm going to go for a 4-0 win prediction between City and West Ham. Now we move on to our next matchup, is Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Brentford. Big match. Very, very big game to contend with in terms of the two sides. Especially, we know that for Wolves, they're a big team, they are, obviously. Now my official prediction between the strugglers of Wolverhampton Wanderers and Brentford. And I know that Wolves cannot pick up a point so far this season. We're going to Christmas now and Wolves have not won a single game in the Premiership. As for Brentford, we all know for them, they've had a little bit of poor patches as well, slightly. They're dropping down the table slightly in the Premier League. But did got a point against Leeds from last game at the GTEC Stadium. But they have lost to Arsenal and they did lose a few games before that as well. So they need to try and get into winning form, of course, back again if they can try and defeat Wolves on Saturday afternoon's kickoff at 3 o'clock. Personally, my prediction this game between Wolves and Brentford, I do think with Wolves, they almost beat us. Oh, sorry, they didn't beat us. They almost got us a point. They almost got a draw against Arsenal at the Emirates last week. It was 1-0 to Arsenal, 1-1, but then Gabriel Jesus saved us and won us the game. So Wolves they've been okay in that sort of match against Arsenal, though. I know they were very unlucky they were when Jesus scored that late goal. Prediction-wise, I do think that this game might come down to a draw, I think. I do think Wolves will definitely get a little bit of momentum after that close of a draw against Arsenal from last week. I do fancy Wolves getting a draw out of this match over Brentford. Brentford, they're going to be up next season. They're going to be safe. They've been very smart. They've been as a club to hire an unknown, let's say, coach in the first team of Keith Andrews, or ex-player, to be manager. But even making Brentford in terms of really keep that data, keep that system alive under Thomas Frank from last season. Obviously, Keith Andrews was the set piece coach for Brentford last season. That's why he knows the inside outs how Brentford play and the identity, and he's carried that into his management of Brentford. So I do think that they ain't going to be anywhere struggling-wise, but I do think they're not going to pick up anything over a win over Wolves. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw as my prediction between Wolves and Brentford on Saturday. Now we move on to 5:30 kickoff on Saturday. We do have Spurs versus Liverpool. Very big matchup, by the way, between Tottenham and Liverpool. We all know that for Spurs, they've had, let's say, their bit of drought a little bit in the Premier League. They actually did lose a few games before, obviously losing to Arsenal in the North London derby. Lost, obviously, massively heavily against Nottingham Forest on Sunday. Spurs got battered 3-0 to Forest. And that was a big loss, that was, by the way. To lose to Forest, away from home is shocking. And they do play Liverpool, though, are also a shocking team, Liverpool. Very shocking, though. But, however, for Liverpool, in fact, they actually did pick up a win against Brighton 2-0 at Anfield from last week. So they're in winning form a little bit now under Arne Slot. And these two teams are crap. These two teams have been crap, And I've seen that this season in terms of Liverpool's form's been dreadful. Spurs as well, dreadful as well. Personally, in my prediction with Thomas Frank's Tottenham and Liverpool in this matchup, Arne Slot's Liverpool, I do think the game will come down to a draw between Spurs and Liverpool. I'm going to go for Tottenham 2, Liverpool 2, as the official ending prediction between the two sides. Both teams will share a point and both teams will get a draw out of each other. Now we move on to our next matchup at 8 o'clock kickoff between Everton and Arsenal. I'll be back home after work, of course, on Saturday at 8 o'clock for that kickoff game. I actually finish work at 7. I'll be home at 7:30 and I'll get straight to the watch along at 8 o'clock between our team, Arsenal, and also Everton away from home. This game will be very, very big. This will be for Arsenal. We know that we did very, very lucky. We're very, very lucky we were against Wolves from last week. We could have actually lost that game. But however, I repeat, we luckily got that late goal by Gabriel Jesus to get ourselves that 3 points. But we are now 2 points clear from Man City at the top of the league at the moment. And we have to keep that momentum high. Everton, however, good season Everton have had so far. Probably the best season they've had for the last 5 years when they had, Ancelotti in charge as manager. They were actually in the top 10, they were. And they really challenged into that top 4 race under Carlo Ancelotti. Then obviously the wheels fell off because he left. Rafa Benitez took over. They got him sacked. They were in the relegation scrap for the last 3 or 4 seasons, down in the bottom. But when David Moyes now took over Everton, he's really, let's say, bring back the Everton way when he used to be a manager many, many years ago from 2002 to 2013. A great manager at the time in his first stint at Everton. But his second spell, he's done quite well as well. And you got to, admire that as well, that Everton's a different team now than before. Because a lot of teams can walk over against Everton. They can walk them over all the games. Arsenal can walk over Everton. And it's happened as well a few occasions. But I know that it's the first time also that Everton will be playing at Everton's new stadium, of course, at the game on Saturday also. That'll be very, very interesting how we respond to that. Jack Grealish, he will be also a big, big threat he will be for Everton on that game against us. Even though he's on loan from Man City, he's a very top player as well. As I've got to look for a prediction, this matchup on that 8 o'clock kickoff game on Saturday between Everton and Arsenal, I think, personally, that Arsenal will get a win over Everton. We have to win this game because we need to go win the league this season, no matter what happens. ASAP, we've got to win the league. But I'm going to go for a win for us. I do think it'll be tight, though. I think Everton will score, but I do think we'll get the win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win away from home at the new stadium. And I think that hopefully Jesus will be fit enough to play that game. He'll be on the score sheet. And I think maybe Declan Rice will be on the score sheet also for Arsenal. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 win as my official prediction. And now we've got the other 8 o'clock game between Leeds United and Crystal Palace, by the way. Big matchup between Leeds. You know, they've done quite well to pick up a point over Brentford. Big win against, was it? The big draw against Liverpool 3-3 at Ellen Road, and even they got a big win over Chelsea the week before that. And Leeds, of course, are now slightly getting themselves away from West Ham United, trying to avoid the drop because their goal difference is pretty good, to be fair, compared to West Ham's as well. And they need to try and to produce that spirit against Palace on Saturday. No losses in the last 3 or 4 games for Leeds. In terms of this prediction between Leeds and Palace, you've got to bear it in mind, though, Palace, of course, have been very good this season. They are in that top 4, they are currently as we speak. And, you know, under Oliver Glasner, he's been really making Palace into a real top team. And it doesn't surprise in terms of the results in the last few games. I know they lost 3-0 to Man City from last week, but you've got to bear it in mind that Palace have been very, very challenging, of course, in that top 4 race. And I don't know if they actually are 4th currently, but they are in that mix. And it will be very interesting how they conduct themselves at Ellen Road on Saturday. It won't be an easy game for Palace, though, because Leeds are very, very, very passionate when it comes to their fans, of course. If I have to look at about a predictions matchup between Leeds and Palace, I do think Palace will get the win over Leeds. And I do think that is going to be a 2-0 win, I think. I don't think Leeds will get any goals in this matchup. I know Leeds are very, very intimidating, they are. Their crowd are. But I do see teams do walk over Leeds couple times this season at home. So I think Palace will be one of those teams who will actually do that to Leeds United. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 win as my prediction between Leeds and Palace. Now we move on now to Sunday's game. Aston Villa versus Manchester United. And yeah, Villa, I've got to say, hats off to Unai Emery. You know, they were currently in the relegation zone at the start of the Premier League season. But momentum started building and building for Aston Villa. They beat Arsenal, the team who should win the league this season. They beat West Ham 3-2. They're challenging at the top of the table now. They're challenging against Arsenal, they're challenging Aston Villa to try and overtake us in top spot. And even Man City also, Aston Villa. And they've been very, very spot on, they've been, in terms of their form so far during the course of this season. Maybe a little blip at the start of the season, but they really picked themselves up, of course, by winning after winning after winning after winning, and also drawing and losing a few games as well during that period. But they're in 3rd position for a reason, and I do think that, as Man United, of course, are very shocking. You know, concede 4 goals against Bournemouth from last game, despite them drawing to them 4-4, but they have their moments at United. I've said this before in the video as well. They have their hit and misses at United. They win games this week. They end up losing, of course, this week. This week they win. The following week they might draw. And they always keep on having that pattern all the time, Man United, under Ruben Amorim. And even the other managers before him, hit and misses every game. But I've got to look about how this game will be predicted, of course, on Sunday. And Villa are a very good side. And they're at home as well. And that'll be a very big consideration how Ruben Amorim could respond to this game. Personally, I've got to say, I think Villa might do it against Man United. I do think Man United will be the ones will fail to get a result over Villa. I do think Villa will win the game against United. So I'm going to go for Villa 2, Manchester United 0 as my prediction at Villa Park. Okay, we move on now to our next matchup. It's going to be Fulham, and they play at 8 o'clock kickoff against Nottingham Forest on Monday Night Football. Fulham versus Forest at Craven Cottage. Well, Forest, massive healthy victory against Tottenham in their last matchup. They are now points away from the relegation drop now. They were in the relegation drop, but Sean Dyche has transformed Forest into a team that they're hard to beat at the back. When under Ange Postecoglou, they were poor, they were. And I thought they kept Ange from then until the end of the season. I think Forest will be in a relegation fight and probably be relegated, could have been, if he stayed in charge as manager for Nottingham Forest. But since Sean Dyche knows the league very, very well, and he knows how the drop is like in the relegation zones when he managed Burnley and Everton in the past, obviously he'll probably do a good job at Forest, and especially used to play for them in his playing days as well. Not played for them as a player, but played in the youth academy, and then he wasn't selected due to injury at the age of 18. And that's why he dropped down the leagues, of course, Sean Dyche, in terms of his amount of playing history. But going back to this game with Fulham, Fulham, however, did lose to Palace 2-1 a few weeks back in their last home game, by the way. Big win against Burnley, 3-2 from last week. They're also bouncing away from the relegation drop also in the Premier League. And obviously they're in a very safe position now. And even Forest as well, slightly in that mix as well, trying to be safe from it all as well. So if I got to put a prediction on this matchup between Fulham and Forest, I do think Fulham, I think they're going to probably win this game against Forest on Monday Night Football. And I think that it'll be a win for Fulham in a real nice ground of Craven Cottage with the floodlights, with the old school ground at Craven Cottage. I think Fulham will do it. I'm going to go for a 3-1 win for my prediction between Fulham and Forest as my final predictions, all on match day 17 before Christmas of the Premier League. And that's going to be a wrap, by the way, for my predictions of the Premier League before Christmas on this video. And if you like this video, go and give it a subscribe and give it a like also. Thank you all for watching as well. Peace out, and I hope you enjoyed this whole predictions of the Premier League season. Have a good one.